My name is Aloan. I live in a small village surrounded by green forests, clear rivers, and fresh air. Since I was a child, I have loved nature. The sound of birds singing in the morning, the rustling of leaves in the wind, and the cool shade of big trees always made me happy. But as I grew older, I saw something terrible happening. Our beautiful village was changing. Factories were built near the river. The water, once clear and fresh, became dark and dirty. The air smelled of smoke. The trees were cut down, and soon, the birds disappeared. People in my village did not seem to care. They only thought about jobs and money. But I could not stay silent. I had to do something. One day, I saw a man cutting down a big tree near my house. I ran to him and shouted, "Please stop. This tree gives us fresh air. Why are you cutting it?" The man looked at me and laughed. "Little girl, this is not your business. Go home." "But the trees are important," I cried. He ignored me and continued his work. I felt helpless, but I did not give up. I went to my school and told my teacher about it. My teacher, Miss Clara, listened to me carefully. "Aloan, I am proud of you. But stopping this alone is hard."
"You need help," she said.
That night, I thought about her words. I needed people to understand why nature is important. So I decided to start a campaign. The next day, I made small posters. I wrote, "Save our trees. Save our future." I asked my friends to help me put them up in the village. At first, people laughed. "She is just a child," they said. But I did not give up. I spoke to the village leader. "Sir, if we cut all the trees, where will we get fresh air? If our river is polluted, what will we drink?" The leader sighed. "Aloan, I understand. But people need jobs. The factories give them money. But at what cost?" I asked. "If the air is dirty and the water is poisoned, we will all suffer." He looked at me but did not answer. I knew I had to do more. One day, a group of workers came to cut more trees near the school. This time, I did not just talk, I stood in front of the trees. "You cannot cut these trees," I shouted. The workers hesitated. "Move, girl. We have orders," one said. I shook my head.
"No.
These trees belong to nature, not just to humans. If you cut them, you destroy our future." A crowd gathered. My friends joined me. Soon more villagers came. They started to understand. They saw the dead fish in the river. They saw their children coughing because of the smoke. Slowly, they realized I was right. The village leader finally took action. He spoke to the factory owners and set rules to protect our nature. The factory had to control its waste. New trees were planted. The river was cleaned. It was not easy, but we fought for it. Now, when I walk through my village, I see green leaves, hear birds, and feel fresh air. I know the fight is not over. But I also know one thing: one voice can make a difference. Because I did. The changes in our village did not happen overnight. It took months, even years, for people to truly understand why nature needed to be protected. Some villagers still did not believe in my fight. They thought I was just a child who did not understand the real world. But I knew I had to keep going. One evening, I sat by the river, watching the water slowly regain its blue color. The sky above reflected in the gentle waves. A soft breeze carried the scent of wet soil and fresh leaves. It felt peaceful. But deep inside, I knew that peace could be taken away anytime if we were not careful. Suddenly, I heard footsteps behind me. I turned around and saw an old man approaching. It was Mr. Harris, one of the oldest members of our village. He rarely spoke to anyone, but that night, he sat beside me. "You remind me of someone," he said in a deep voice. "Who?" I asked. "My daughter. She fought for this land many years ago. She wanted to save the forest just like you," he said. His eyes were filled with memories. But people did not listen to her. They called her foolish. I swallowed. "Did she give up?" He shook his head. "No. She kept fighting, even when people turned against her, even when they called her crazy." "What happened to her?" I whispered. Mr. Harris looked at the river. "She left. She went to the city to find help." But she never came back. My heart felt heavy.
Why? She got sick.
The pollution, the stress, it took her away from us. His voice broke. She was right, Aloan. We were wrong to ignore her. Silence filled the air. I clenched my fists. I will not give up, Mr. Harris. I will fight for this village. I will fight for nature. He looked at me and smiled. Then you are braver than most adults here. That night, I could not sleep. I kept thinking about Mr. Harris's daughter. She had fought for the same cause, yet no one listened to her. Would the same thing happen to me? Would my fight be forgotten?
No.
I could not let that happen. The next day, I went to the village school and gathered all my friends. We need to do more, I said. We saved some trees, but the fight is not over. What do you want to do, Aloan? My friend, Liam, asked. I took a deep breath. We need to take this fight outside our village. We need to tell the world what is happening here. But how? My friend Ava asked. We will write letters. To the mayor. To the newspapers. To the environmental organizations. We will not stop until someone listens. The others looked at each other. Then, one by one, they nodded. And so, we began our next battle. Every day after school, we wrote letters. Some of us drew pictures of our dying river and the disappearing trees. We took photos and sent them to environmental activists online. We used every way possible to make our voices heard. Weeks passed. At first, we got no response. Some people even laughed at us. But one day, everything changed. A journalist came to our village. She had read one of our letters. She wanted to write a story about our fight. Tell me everything, she said, holding her camera. I spoke about the factories, the pollution, the dying animals, and the trees being cut down. I showed her the river and the factory's smoke covering the sky. My friends spoke, too. Even some villagers who once doubted me now stood beside us. The journalist took photos and videos. The world needs to see this, she said. A week later, our story appeared in a national newspaper. Then it was on TV. People across the country saw what was happening in our small village. Environmentalists started visiting. Activists raised their voices. The government finally took action. New laws were passed. Factories were forced to reduce their pollution. Large companies were fined for harming the environment. And best of all, a reforestation project was started. I could hardly believe it. One day, as I walked through the village, I saw Mr. Harris standing by the river.
He smiled at me.
She would have been proud of you, he said. Tears filled my eyes. We did it, I whispered. Years passed. The trees grew back. The river became clean again. Birds returned to our skies. Our village was once again the beautiful place I had always loved. I knew I was just one girl. But I also knew that one voice, one person, could start a movement. And that movement could change the world. Nature is not just a part of our world, it is our home. If we do not protect it, we destroy our future. Even a single person can make a difference. All it takes is courage and the will to fight for what is right. Because if we do not stand up for nature, who will?